It was at the end of the 19th century that a small group of southern white rhinoceros were discovered in the Umfolozi Shishlui region of South Africa. At the time, the white rhino was thought to be extinct, lost to the guns and trophy rooms of colonial hunters, but today they number more than 20,000. The program that brought the species back from the scrap heap of extinction is considered to be one of conservation's great success stories. But a massive surge in poaching now threatens to undo more than a century of careful protection and management. I guess the beginning of the story starts with how many people on this planet see the Earth as a living organism, and how many people on this Earth see the life support system that is the Earth. Man sees themselves as separate to nature, and they see nature as providing for them, and they dominate nature. A caretaker role wasn't the issue. It was use it. It's there for you. Take it. And take it as much as you like. Take as much as you like. The crisis is entirely caused by humans. What many people fail to realize is that each extinction harms many more species which are bound together in a complex ecological web. The numbers of extinctions are likely to snowball as ecosystems unravel.
It really begins with realizing that we as humankind are really one of 13 million species on this earth, that we are of a planet Earth, and without that interdependency on all species in all systems that make up our greater biodiversity, we could not really live and function. And so the rhino saga comes at a time when planet Earth is under the greatest danger that it's been for the last thousands of years.
Even though animals go extinct because of the loss of habitat, the reverse is also true. If there were no wild animals, there would be little motivation to preserve habitat, and therefore the wild and wild areas. We need everyone to stand up and voice and protest, because we're talking about an ethic, the conservation ethic, the living on this planet ethic.
It's not a Kruger War, or it's not an Ezemvelo War, or it's not a Mpumalanga or a Northwest or a Limpopo War. It's a war against South Africa.
We are at a critical junction now. It's almost impossible to stress how critical that juncture is.
Which means that if we do nothing, it will actually disappear without our help.
There's going to be game reserves and zoos which are going to keep the species alive. But if that's what it comes down to, then it's a very, very, very sad day.
I feel we have it in ourselves. We just need to do some few things right.
You're asking me whether this fight can be won? In a word, yes, of course. Without a moment's hesitation, I will say yes, it can be won.
Since 2007, we have seen a dramatic increase in rhino poaching.
Rhino poachers in Zululand, by far the greater majority of them have a Mozambican influence. Many of the rhino poaching gangs that we've arrested are Mozambican.
That's where the recruiters are going to find poachers. There are very few opportunities there. There's no money.
And 3 people well concealed, hiding out in the bush, not moving, very difficult to find. The rhinos are vulnerable, believe it or not. Although the animal might weigh up to 2 tons and have 2 big horns on the end of its face, it's actually a vulnerable animal. Rhinos don't move that fast. The white rhinos in particular favour open areas. Their habits are habitual. They make it easy for us as human beings to learn about them, which is good, but then those human beings that want to exploit them, it makes it easy for them too, and that's not a good thing.
In February 2014 in the Northwest Province, a mother and her calf were killed, their horns hacked off by the poachers. A 3-year-old boy survived.
They called us on Tuesday morning to say that they found one of their rhino with a bad limp, and they can see blood on the left front leg, so they suspect it's been poached. We spotted it from the air and the decision was made to dart the animal. There were 2 bullet wounds, the one on the left front leg, and then there was one in the face itself, right below, about 2 centimeters behind the eyes.
The problem is that then we can't leave them there, especially in an area here where there's predators. They're weakened, so the chances of them being taken out by the predators then is unfortunately big.
So then we cleaned out the wounds, we got a truck and a crate, we loaded it and we brought it to their bomas as a temporary measurement and to treat the wounds further and then to see where we can move the animal to be in a safe place.
White rhino notoriously do not like boma, so we didn't want to keep him in here for very long. When we arrived this morning, he was already lying down.
It's never a good sign if a wild animal or an animal in a boma is down and is not really reacting to stimuli.
We then went on to immobilize him, only gave very few drugs. He had 1 bullet wound just at his elbow. It was looking quite clean. The next step was I inserted what looks like cotton. It's actually a very specialized product, and it also gets completely absorbed by the body. And then went onto the head where there was also a bullet wound, an entry wound which was really small, and then the exit wound, there was still an opening into the sinuses. Fortunately the brain is a little bit further back, so they missed the brain and then closed that over. Unfortunately, it is not only those wounds that we have to treat, we have to look at the whole animal, and this animal was weak.
What happens with them is they can develop stomach ulcers. That immediately suppresses their appetite and they don't want to eat. It breaks down its own body actually to stay alive. It breaks down all its proteins. By doing that, it becomes weaker and weaker, and that's what we see here today. You can't just leave him. If he lies too long in one spot due to their weight, they actually get compartmental syndrome of the muscles in their legs. So that means there's not enough oxygenated blood flowing through there, and then the muscles starve off due to oxygen starvation, and then it can become necrotic.
Unfortunately with these guys, they're very heavy, they lie on their legs and then they battle to get up. So we try and get the I know the one girl said to me, why are you prodding it so much? It's like the quicker we get him up, the quicker we get him on his feet, the more chance he has of survival. Try to pull him up to get his legs under him, and as soon as sometimes they've got their legs under him, that's enough for them to get up and keep going. It might look terrible, but it's that last stretch that's enough just to get him up.
By the time he was relaxing, he was actually dead already. So I think that while he was stiffening up, it's probably his heart that just stopped at that stage.
1, 2, let's go. We were all like, well, it doesn't look like we're actually going to get him up. So you don't really want to give up, but it's one of those things, you know. So it's sad. And I know it's very cruel, and I hate doing what I do like that, but I've only got that little time limit to get him up, and then once you get over a time limit, you're kind of on borrowed time, and we got there, and he gave up.
It is a horrible outcome. This is the first animal I've worked with that did not make it, and it just says to me I need to be better. What we've done here, yes, it's a lot, but the outcome was not good, so it was not good enough.
It's heartbreaking. You know, you feel they failed. You failed that rhino, you failed yourself, you failed the park, you failed the people. you can't dwell on it, because there are still lots of rhinos that need protecting, and to sit and you have to cry for that rhino, you will, but you have to stand up and make it, and it makes you stronger. And I see it every time that we deal with this, that the field rangers are just as upset as I get upset. I mean, it's easy for me to get upset, but they also get upset. Somebody infiltrated their backyard. This is their Garden of Eden that they are trying to conserve and preserve for everybody.
I don't know if you could go out and shoot a brother or a sister, and when you perceive these animals as brothers and sisters, it will change you.
Rhino problem is immense. You know, we prefer to call problems challenges, but this one has now escalated to a problem. It's no longer a challenge. We are struggling to contain it as a country. I think it's more about changing the mindset. It's going to take time. Hopefully by the time we get it right, we'll still be having our rhino species.
Rhino poaching South Africa because of the war, because of the Bush War, because of the fact that South Africa was largely isolated in the 1980s and up to the very early 1990s, largely escaped the massive amounts of poaching that were going on north of our borders.
The problem is that there are people that live beyond the rhinos' ranges in the consumer states that covered our rhinos immensely.
Traditionally, for thousands of years, it was used as a fever reducer, and now more recently as a supposed cancer cure.
And then suddenly there was a resurgence in 2007 onwards, but now it popped up from Vietnam. And what's now happened is you've got a country that has got increasing economic power, much more disposable income, and people now are able to spend this on other things, such rhino horn. Now they use it what they call the bling factor. It's nice to have rhino horn because it gives them increased status. And remember, South Africa is the custodian of probably 70 to 80% of the world's rhinos.
South Africa has a fantastic track record when it comes to conservation. One example is the growth of rhino numbers since the 1940s and 50s.
In 1895, they were thought to be extinct. And then there was a man hunting at the junction of the White and the Black Mfolozi rivers, and he was hunting black rhino, and he shot 2 rhino, and to his astonishment they turned out to be white rhino. And then the governor of the colony, because Natal was then a British colony, he was pressured to proclaim the Mfolozi Game Reserve and the Mklechi Game Reserve and Isimangaliso, or what was called Lake St. Lucia Game Reserve. So we owe our game reserves to the white rhino. Between 1895 and 1953, the rhino population was gradually increasing because of the protection. And then in 1953, myself and Ranger Hendrik van Spoor did an aerial count, and we found that there were 437. I went to the board, what was then the Natal Parks Game and Fish Preservation Board, and I said I thought the time had come when we needed to capture them and to put them back where they had been before, like the Kruger Park, like the Orange Free State, and in Mpumalanga, and also put them back into Zimbabwe. So that was the start. 1961 was the start of Operation Rhino.
Only in the 1960s were there radical changes. We were able to develop capture techniques for rhinos, chemical capture. Immediately that made it different, but it allowed us to catch it and move them.
Warden Player injects an antidote which will wake him up long enough to get him into a stout cage which has been moved up in front of him. Once inside the cage, the rhino will go straight to sleep again and wake up in camp.
And today, the rhinos that we have here in the Pilanesberg are the brothers and sisters of those out of Mfolozi, as is Kruger. So that work was done. Consequence being, as Wilderness Leadership School, which is Ian's organisation that he founded, we have a responsibility equally to continue the work that Ian started. On the 2nd of March 2012, 1 cow and 2 bull rhinos were poached at the Karika Game Reserve. Tragically, 1 bull was fatally wounded and died during the course of the night. The remaining two animals, Temba and Tundi, were severely injured. They were darted and immobilized with drugs that could only be available to vets.
Temba and Tundi were still alive on arrival. The bull, unfortunately, bull number 84, had not made it.
Nothing can ever prepare you for what you find there. You know, finding Temba in a state of semi-consciousness, struggling to stand, because Kariga had already administered some form of antidote under my instruction.
And once we reversed the drug and got him going, he managed to get a couple of steps out. We immediately saw problems with the hind legs.
And then finding Tundi in an absolutely horrific state of affairs. My first impression was, we're going to have to put this one to sleep. And we assumed that they had been poached using drugs which should only be available to vets, the opioid family of drugs. So antidote was the first priority, and to my surprise, both of them started to stand up within 5 minutes of us applying the antidote treatment. Every minute that goes by, there is more and more circulation issues to muscle groups and internal organs, and ultimately that's what kills them. Yeah, to my utter amazement, she stumbled to her feet this time. She actually managed to get up. And she stumbled away down the hill and she started to turn, and as she came back into our vision again, we could see the full extent of her injuries from the front. Yeah, and you know, the amazement of her waking up, and then suddenly the reminder that now we've actually got something that is alive, is conscious of all she's going through.
And then about 3 days later, we darted both of them and then started the treatment.
For 24 days, wildlife vet Dr. William Folds worked tirelessly with the Kariga team to give these survivors the best possible care and a chance for recovery.
They slashed through the bone that the growth plate sits on, through the skull below that, and right into the sinuses. There's just absolutely no regard for that animal. And it still didn't make sense that she was looking as good as she was, given the extent of her facial injuries. In the end, what it required was just a natural assistance to the healing process, really. Just by taking away dead tissue and controlling the maggots and the infection and the implications of trauma at that level. But we were amazed at how well those holes closed up.
It is thought that Tundi and Temba were down for more than 6 hours. A dangerous time for a rhino to be laying on its side. In Temba's case, the weight of his body cut off oxygen to his hind leg, and the muscles became necrotic due to oxygen starvation.
I would follow him on a daily basis and see how far he'd walked, and if he'd been grazing, and if he'd got to water. That was very important, and we were very happy to note, I think it was on the Saturday, that he had reached the dam and he had drank water and he'd stayed by the dam. We'd seen where he'd grazed. The next morning I got there to continue my observations and found him in the dam, and with his damaged leg couldn't get out again. So I called Will, and he said, well, we'll try and pull him out with ropes and so on. And the poor guy must have been stressed out. He'd spent the whole night in the dam, he'd most of the morning now, and he started thrashing about in the water. And with thrashing about trying to get out, he only managed to work himself deeper into the dam until it got to a point where he was struggling to keep his head up. His nose went under the water, and eventually he just lay still in the water. I tried to pick his head up. He was breathing through his open holes in his nostrils here where he was damaged, but I just couldn't keep his head above, his nostrils above the water, and you could actually hear the water going down his nostrils into his throat, and slowly the bubbles returning, and he just went quiet. For that almost a month, everything we lived for in that period. 24 hours we were looking after him. So the day he died, it was like losing a friend. It really was.
After the death of Temba, Tundi went from strength to strength. You know, there's no question that right now we have to protect rhino until we find a solution to this crisis. The more you have a presence in the field itself, the less likelihood there is of a poacher wanting to intrude into that area because the risk is just too great for compromise or capture.
Ready, move.
Our field rangers, those are the people who every time they're out there day and night to make sure that they contain rhino poaching. They are committed, they are dedicated, and with little resources that they have, they are making it.
This is a war that's being fought on a lot of fronts, whether it be, but our job here is, because the rhinos live here, we have to protect them here.
It is a problem which we daily need to be looking at when, how, and what could happen. And therefore we need to always, daily, be on the alert in case there's even the slightest indication that there could be poaching in the reserve.
If you lose one rhino, you feel it. And how much effort do you have to put in to only lose 1 or 2 or 5 rhinos in a year? And it's costly, we know this.
You have to have security personnel out in the reserve every day. You need to have vehicles, you need to have equipment.
The contribution to the Wilderness Leadership School that they've made in this park in particular has been significant. They help cleaning up the vegetation from alien plants and rehabilitate land to become wilderness again and part of nature without the threats that go with it. And right up to anti-poaching. I mean, without them, I think this park would have taken 10 steps back in the poaching war. The contributions made by themselves as people in terms of dedication and coming out and spending nights here and helping them patrolling and fence lines and boundary patrols.
We have wilderness school people who volunteer at their cost and their time to sit here in this park and provide observation posts. And we're talking about people that will spend several days on the side of a hill in the baking sun, alert, listening and observing to try and foil the poachers.
I mean, without them, I think this park would have taken 10 steps back in the poaching war.
And I believe certainly that this is a direct consequence of having the numbers of trained people, the deployment by vehicles, the use of tracker dogs, and a very visible presence of protection personnel. The park honour us in the sense that they trust us with their rhino. You can imagine you can't just allow anybody to come and do time in the reserve, after hours in particular.
You can see here we found ourselves a spoor. It's not a Parks Board issue boot print, so we have to assume that that spoor is related to the hole in the fence. Now what's interesting is we've got an incoming spoor. What we now need to see is if we've got an outgoing spoor.
Often it's only wilderness school people in the reserve late at night, so those people have to be totally trustworthy, and that's the quality of the relationship we have, is that we are entrusted to do this.
It's a trust which has been cemented on commitment. We have seen an immense commitment from Wilderness Leadership School, especially here in Pilanesberg. They have been here for over 16 years. The friendship, the relationship, it goes into having to plan together. You know, you can't plan together and share your plans with people who you do not trust and who you do not believe they share the common vision with you. Wilderness Leadership School have played that role very well.
The world cannot let an animal of this prehistoric age become extinct. I mean, it's just unforgivable. As human beings, we owe other life. We owe them the right to a place in the sun. You know, if we lose the rhino, we could be on our own road to extinction. Because if we don't care about them, how can we even care about ourselves?
For in creation is my fingerprint, my ever-presence. If you look upon my wilderness, you look upon me. Can you see me? In the color of the grass is my complexion. Feel the texture of my skin. Absorb my warmth. The sun and its rays come from me. The bird that flies above your body brings my message of life. See the insect, which appears insignificant, it is of my heart. It brings much to this world. Be at one with it and all life. For life is given by me, the Great Spirit. I am true to you. You are mine. I made you.